throughout their journey, what we realized that there was a demand for people to think about their future. The problem is a huge divide where there's a huge rising middle class about to discover more money than enough. A revolution around how people think about their wealth and their money in Indonesia. Do well and you do it really quickly.
Welcome, Anderson.
Thank you so much for having me.
Hi, everyone. I'm very delighted today to welcome Anderson Sumarli to our Frankly Speaking podcast. Anderson, a close friend of mine, is a visionary entrepreneur, CEO and co-founder of Ajaib. For those of you who don't know Ajaib yet, Ajaib is a company that has revolutionized Indonesia's investment landscape. In less than 5 years, it has become Indonesia's unicorn, a testament of course, Anderson's and the team's innovative approach. He graduated from Cornell University, went to Stanford Business School, and he founded Ajaib at the remarkable age of only 22. So quite amazing. Some stats on Ajaib. It is an investment platform which captured very significant portion of retail stock investors, with over 90% of its customers being Gen Z and millennials. Alpha GWC has a great privilege to also support and partner with Ajaib from the early days. And Ajaib has truly democratized investing for younger generations in Indonesia, with, if I'm not mistaken, more than 80% of Ajaib's users being first-time investors. Mm-hmm. And right now, if I'm not mistaken, maybe around 40% of new investors in Indonesia are actually onboarded through Ajaib.
Yes.
Amazing number. What's more important, Ajaib has a mission that extends beyond business success. Its mission is actually to improve wealth distribution in Indonesia by providing people with investment opportunities. Amazing to have you today, Anderson. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Let me start with this. What's the most unusual financial tip you've ever received? And did it actually work?
Well, very early on, somebody was telling me, when you're starting to invest and you don't know anything, you should try to invest in names that you know. So sure. You invest in the telco company you use, in your favorite restaurants, or your favorite banking relationship. And I've always thought of that as pretty weird because, is it really a good strategy to invest in names just because they happen to interact with you on a daily basis? But over time, I think that I've learned some wisdom in that, when you're starting out and we have helped millions of people now begin their investment journey, it's always good to start with what you're relevant with, because investing into a certain stock or a certain crypto or your favorite asset class is not just a regular investment. You are becoming a part of the shareholding structure, or you're part of the project that you're involved in. And so it's a living being. You got to read the news. You got to know what's up and coming, what's their strategy, who's their personnel. And it actually helps to start with a name or a brand that you are actually genuinely interested in keeping up to date with. So I've found wisdom in it over time.
Amazing. That's great. You are, maybe a lot of people in Indonesia already know Ajaib, but many people don't know you as a person, right, Anderson? Can you share some insights into your background, maybe your early life and family background for us?
Sure, yeah. Our culture at Ajaib is a bit more camera shy, so we try to put our product up front. But for my background, I've always grew up around technology and financial services. Mm-hmm. For some reason, I've just been really drawn to the complexities and big challenges in this convoluted space in financial services. So, I, since a very early age, already had an interest in it. My interest started in the capital market space. Believe it or not, when I was about 9 years old, I used to really like reading the newspaper, and I liked reading it because...
Sorry, at the age of 9, you read newspapers?
Yeah, but I like to read it not because of the actual headlines or the content, but I like to read it because back then they used to publish the theater schedule, the movie schedule, in this pre-internet, and I want to see what's playing in the cinema, on that day. But coincidentally, underneath that section, they always publish the stock price of the day. And so I was actually really drawn by capital markets because of the numbers. And I looked at the numbers moving up and down. And one day I told my dad, hey, I see this one stock. The price looks like it's going up all the time. Can I buy that? And he took me seriously. He actually bought it, and it actually went up quite a bit. But I've always been really fascinated by these complexities inherent in financial services. So much so that I then went on throughout my career.
So what stock was this?
Oh, this is. I shouldn't say it. It's still there. I made money. I shouldn't say it, but it's one of those stocks that's maybe less driven by fundamentals.
Okay.
So I've come to learn more about how to properly vet stocks, and so I wouldn't recommend it at this point in time.
But you make money out of it.
Yes,
that's what matters. That's what matters.
That's made money. But later on in my career, my first job, I worked in technology. I worked in one of the oldest technology companies out there at IBM.
Yeah.
I was in New York in the headquarters working there. And then later on, I came back to Indonesia and I worked on helping a bunch of banks, financing companies, these financial service companies to make the leap to digital. And so that was a combination of both interests for me, bringing technology to rural financial services. And it landed eventually on me building Ajaib.
If I did my research correctly, you went to Cornell for undergrad.
Yes.
At the age of 16.
Yes, that's right. Yes.
That's not normal, Anderson. I think most people went to college at 18, right? What was the story behind it?
So I went to much of my high school in Singapore.
Yeah.
Okay. And when I was like 14 years old, I knew already I love building things with my hands. So I used to be really interested in cooking and building things with my hands, arts and crafts and things like that. And one of the things that happened in the Singapore education system when you reach senior year or secondary school there is that you have to choose your classes, what you want.
Yeah.
And I really wanted to choose design and technology. I wanted to choose cooking classes. It's kind of like more of doing things with your hands. And the direction I got is like, no, you don't do that. You learn a triple science, double math. So you learn biology, chemistry, physics, and double math.
Sorry, who told you this?
This was the school. So
the school.
The school. So the idea back then, I don't know if they're still doing now, is that if you get good grades, you got to go to those are your traditional paths. Take sciences and maths, and you become a doctor and stuff like that.
Got it.
Whereas if you don't do as well, then you take more practical classes. But I was so fascinated with the practical classes, right? So I really disliked my experience in senior year or in secondary school because I thought I really wanted to do this. So found out that apparently if you go to the United States and you go through a community college first before you go to a four-year college, you get to skip a couple grades and you get to join them early.
I see.
And so I was like, I couldn't wait to start taking classes that I actually was interested in.
Got it.
So when I went to community college, I was so happy I was able to take classes around history of art, around theater, around everything that I was actually really interested in. So that was the motivation to start early, was because I can take classes that I actually am interested in.
Got it. So you graduated from Cornell, applied economics, right?
Yeah, that's right, yes.
Then you went to IBM in the New York office.
Yes.
Then you went back home, working at Boston Consulting Group.
Yes.
Then you went to Stanford, right? Why did you choose this path?
Well, in a lot of ways, the path chose me. So out of community college, it was a one-year community college. I've always was meant to go to school in what's called the West Coast. So this is California, this is LA, or this is SF. Like that was the normal thing to do for a lot of folks that come from Southeast Asia who went to the community college that I went to. I only applied to one school that was in the East Coast, which is like the New York side of things and stuff like that, and that was Cornell. and I applied not knowing what Cornell was. I actually only applied because my uncle was telling me something about, hey, there's this thing called Ivy League programs, and back then there was only one school that was still accepting applications. So, so I just applied to it on a whim, and I was thankful that they accepted me, but I actually decided to go there just because it was New York. Little did I know, once I went there, this was 5 hours away from New York City.
You didn't know it?
I didn't know. And they had 10 months of winter out of a year. This is somebody coming from Jakarta, super hot, no winter, never seen the snowfall ever in my life, to go into that environment and immediately starting school the next week. So, it was a string of things that just happened in life. And from there, I started dreaming to go to Wall Street because of the proximity. I was like, I want to be a banker. And then, 50 rejections later, it turns out that I actually got more offers on the technology side of jobs than there are in banking jobs.
Interesting.
And so I said, okay, maybe this is a sign. Maybe this is what I'm meant to do. And that's how I ended up in IBM. And I was surrounded by all these PhDs and master's students. And I was, it just drawing me further deeper into this fascination around technology. And back then, IBM was kind of an OG in the AI space. I was working out their Watson office for a couple of times out of the month, where I didn't do much there on the research side, but I was surrounded by all these PhDs who did this for a living. And so that extended fascination. And, by that time, I was probably around 20, maybe 20 years old, and I realized that I've been living outside of Indonesia longer than I was in Indonesia. And so I said, I better go back and I better start learning about where I came from and being closer to family. So I came back. I was lucky that I got into management consulting, which again, it wasn't a plan. I discovered it because my brother was telling me about this, and I was like, okay, that seems fascinating. And from there, I was able to work on all these incredible projects around financial services. So, one thing just led to the other, and it landed me in the heart of Silicon Valley. And I met my co-founder, who is my classmate. So my whole story is just really a string of things that happened.
Let me pause there a little bit. So I think that's quite a big decision, right? Because I know there's a lot of very high talented Indonesian who decided to, they've been studying abroad and they decided to have a career abroad in the US or in Europe.
Yeah.
It's quite a big decision to go back to Indonesia with a lot of uncertainty.
Yes.
People question about whether Indonesia can reward them, whether Indonesia can appreciate them, whether they will have enough satisfaction in their career. What was your decision-making framework back then? Why did you decide to take the leap of faith and come back to Indo?
Yeah, so in 2014, that's when I graduated from Cornell, right? I started hearing rumors of this tech scene that's happening in Indonesia. I started hearing rumors of Gojek, Tokopedia.
This is 2014?
2014, yeah, Traveloka. This was at the early, scaling stages of these companies. I'm not even sure how much they've raised by then, but they did raise quite a certain amount of money. And I heard about it, and I said, wow, that can never work. Why can't it work? Well, when I was in the US, I was using Uber, and they had to have debit card attached to Uber. And I said, that will never work because Indonesia, is their financial services ecosystem is not mature. How can you get people to pay for these services with their cards? And there's no subscription, capability as well in Indonesia. And so I kind of like brushed that off and just went on my own way. But 2016, 2017, it was pretty clear when I was at Stanford that these companies, these founders of these companies, were visiting Silicon Valley. And so I got to interact with the founders one-on-one, and it was pretty clear that this was a real thing, that this thing was no longer a rumor, and it was very serious. They were putting serious amounts of money behind these, and they were hiring serious people out of the Silicon Valley area and so forth. So to me, it was a pretty obvious decision that, wow, this is probably the most exciting opportunity that I can grab my hands on in the whole world. I want to be part of this technology, the advent of technology in Southeast Asia, particularly in Indonesia. The question for me was just, how was I going to be a part of it? And, this was where I went through this certain journey. And we can talk about that a bit as well. But it went through a certain journey. It wasn't an immediate idea. It wasn't something I woke up with from my dreams. But I found my way back to financial services through this journey.
Got it. So when did you come up exactly with the idea that you wanted to become an entrepreneur? Is this before you went to Stanford, and that's why you decided you're going to Stanford MBA, or you want to become an entrepreneur during your study? So
I actually went to Stanford because I wanted to be a venture capitalist.
Interesting.
Funny enough. I want to be a venture capitalist. I said that maybe...
Why?
Well, for me, I just didn't think that I had that experience enough to build my own company and be an operator, right? But I thought that, hey, but maybe I can be an investor because, I can learn some things from the Valley and bring it back here. And then in my first year at business school, I did an externship with one of the VC firms there where, one of the tasks I had to do is help them understand fintech development in India. How do we think about investing in fintech in India? And I went through that process, like what does retention mean in a world where it's a peer-to-peer lending company? Do you want people to be hooked on borrowing more money? So I had to do a lot of education there. And then by the end of that, I decided that, look, it's a lot funner, for me to be on the other side. There's actually two things that happened. First thing was that, and the second thing was that Tony Xu from DoorDash was went to one of the classes. And, he was telling me that he started the company when he was a student at Stanford. And he said that he didn't know much, but he just started it and people helped him along the way. And so I said, okay, maybe you don't need to know that much. Maybe people will support you along the way. And we're very gracious that people like Alpha JWC and others did help us along the way. So those were kind of the two formative experiences. Seeing what an investor does and realizing that I want to be on the other side. And second of all, getting that real of confidence and starting it out that triggered me to be, I want to be an entrepreneur and start something.
Makes sense. For folks who are not familiar, Tony Xu is the co-founder and CEO of DoorDash,
yes.
One of the biggest online food delivery platform in the US, which is also a Stanford alum, right?
Yes.
So you met Yara when you were studying there.
Yes.
If I heard correctly, the initial idea was not to make a stock brokerage, right?
Yeah.
Your first idea was to build an insurtech company.
Yeah.
And then you pivoted. Mm-hmm. Can you share a little bit about that? Because for folks, probably entrepreneurs who are also watching, sometimes they are torn between keep pushing with this initial idea that they have or pivoting to the idea.
Yeah.
So if you can share a little bit into that day when you have this initial idea and what's the framework that you use to decide to pivot?
So actually, my initial idea was even worse before that. This was so the story between my co-founder and I, how we met each other, was that we both were about to start our own companies, and we both became accountability partners in helping brainstorm the ideas. So I wanted to build something that was pretty bad as an idea. I want to be building a ticketing platform out of Indonesia and then to Southeast Asia, which later on I found out I concluded the market wasn't that big, and she wanted to do something else where the market wasn't that big either. Thankfully, we both successfully convinced each other not to pursue our ideas, but then we decided throughout the process that we had quite complementary value systems and beliefs that we would abandon our ideas and let's come together and let's build something pretty awesome. And we both gravitated towards financial services. So the thinking was that back then, when you look at Indonesia, the financial service space, there's already plenty of people in the lending space, digitizing lending. There's a bunch of folks that's digitizing payments through payment gateways and so forth. And there's also a bunch of mobile banking things. And so we said, look, what's really missing in our minds was something initially around insurance. Maybe people need insurance. So we pursued that idea for a bit of time. And then we started understanding the market structures. actually, like our initial idea was actually to go after the Gojek drivers and give them insurance. So we actually onboarded quite a sizable number of them actually. But what our realization is this, that the insurance market in Indonesia is still majority life insurance. And non-life insurance is not a lot of money to be made. And then within life insurance, it's majority investment linked. And it's predominantly investment linked. This outlawed life insurance product that's attached to an investment portfolio that's no longer allowed in parts of India and parts of Europe and in the US. And the regulation still does not permit investment-linked insurance to be sold online. I believe that now it's somewhat, but back then it wasn't. So we concluded there's no place for technology to really make a big splash here. But throughout the journey, what we realized that there was a demand for people to think about their future, about their money, and about investing, because they were using this investment-linked insurance product, less so of an insurance plan, but more so of a retirement investment plan, or more of a for their children's education. So we said, this was an interesting insight that we found, and so we went down the path of investments. And we think that Indonesia's financial services presents such a huge opportunity, not just in Indonesia, large parts of Southeast Asia as well. We're fourth largest population in the world, 270 million people, one of the largest rising middle class in the world. The median age of our country is like 30 years old, which is insane. It means that half of our country, 135 million, are either millennials, Gen Zs, Gen Alphas, or babies.
Yes.
So it presents such a huge opportunity. Meanwhile, we saw the other end of it, things, which was we're also the third largest unbanked population in the world after China and India, 130 million, depending on the number, unbanked. We only have a low single digit of population that invested in capital markets. That number is already well in the double digits in many other parts of Southeast Asia and Asia itself. And we're like 14 or 15% formal credit penetration. People having access from financial institutions to get credit. So you have this huge problem, this huge divide where there's a huge rising middle class about to discover more money than they know how to spend. Mm-hmm. And then you have institutions and incumbents that either doesn't know yet how to serve them or doesn't want to serve them. Yeah. And that's how we came up and said, all right, we have to build Ajaib. This is our spot, is to go and bridge the next generation to modern financial services. So that's how our thesis came about over multiple iterations of our journey.
So it's a very structured, analytical approach to make these decisions. Yeah. And yes. I think it's also helpful you have a partner that yes. can always give you constructive feedback along the
yes. way. I mean, one of the things that I also have to say, though, is that a lot of people really think that they can intellectualize, smart people think that they can sit down and intellectualize this journey. We certainly were not smart enough to do that. We actually had to go through the journey to actually realize some of these things. And so there's also some wisdom in just trying and starting out first, and then adapting and iterating over time. We truly believe in that methodology rather than locking ourselves in a room and really brainstorming things out completely.
If you can give advice to entrepreneurs out there, how should they think about keep pushing through versus pivoting?
So this depends on the risk profile of the entrepreneur, right? I always say that the best outcome in a company is that you do well and you do it really quickly, okay? The worst outcome is that you do poorly and you do it very slowly. You lost a significant chunk of your life. The two things in the middle, right? The second best is that you do well, but it's slow. And then the third best or second worst is that you fail, but you fail quickly, so you don't waste your time. The problem is that this two middle outcomes, you don't know the difference. When, it's very difficult to differentiate when you're moving slowly, whether you are going to be a default success or a default loss. And so, I always tell entrepreneurs, right, you want to try something quick in the beginning, right? So the way you do it is you remove all the distractions. There's things that you have to do on HR when you build a company, things you do in finance when you build a company, remove all that distraction, strip that away, and you ask yourself, what is the fundamental truth that needs to happen for my thesis to be correct? Yeah. Right? And if that truth is correct, everything, I can get really bad HR team. I can get really bad at doing all these things. And even your technology systems might not be really good, depending on what you're pursuing. But if I get this truth correct, then I'll be a success, right? And so, I always tell entrepreneurs, you got to figure out what's that one truth that you want to test really, really harshly in the beginning so that you can fail fast or you can succeed fast and then decide what to do next. It's just really distilling that, but it's a really incredibly difficult process for people to go through.
That's very good. So this is like a scientist who have hypothesis and they're trying to validate. I think the key is to make sure it's very, very clear what hypothesis needs to be true before you invest more time in it.
Correct. A lot of the smart people, their biggest, founders who are really smart, the biggest issue is that they're probably optimizing for the wrong things. They're trying to test a hypothesis that either is incorrect or is irrelevant.
Great. So you found Ajaib at the age of maybe 22, 23.
I think something like that.
Right? And Yada was 25, 26.
Yeah, she's like 2 years above me, so about 24,
Share with us the hardest thing or the most challenging thing when you are just building this company. And if I understand correctly, both of you are first-time founders. This is the first time you became CEO.
Yes.
Right? With a baby face, trying to pitch to investors.
Yes.
Right? Of course, you have great credentials, Cornell, Stanford, IBM, BCG.
Yes.
But still, you've never become a CEO before. What was the most difficult challenge back then when you just started?
Those credentials really didn't mean much for a lot of people. So think about it. Like back then when we started in 2019, right? The background is that we were building a company out of Southeast Asia, which a lot of people couldn't point on the map. In Indonesia, which people didn't know was in Southeast Asia. Doing fintech, which I think a lot of people can forget now, but fintech was as foreign and specialty-wise as a biotech back then. It's like there's only several people who actually understand fintech and specialize in it. And there wasn't a precedent of any CEO founder back then of a successful fintech company that's non-technical, okay? So here we are, right, trying to pitch for our first fundraise, right? And it was a huge rejection after rejection. I can still remember, I think it must have been 60 to 70 name cards that I took on. Everybody who would talk to me, I would talk to them. Obviously, Alpha JWC, I had the benefit of knowing them through a previous relationship, through work and stuff, that they would trust this person who's starting to do something. So I was very thankful of catching a break there. But back then, like kind of the background, I just want to make it clear, was it was not an obvious, thing that this was something that was going to be anything meaningful at all. In fact, some of the investors that backed us in the beginning was more like, I don't know what you're doing. I have no clue, but let's give you a shot, right? And so we just took it, right? And we didn't have much money, so we didn't have. In the beginning, we didn't have any money actually to buy anything. I still remember when we had to buy the first table in our office space. I was borrowing an office space, by the way, so I wasn't paying rent. I was borrowing an office space, and so we had to buy a table. It was maybe about like $100. And I was like, oh my God, this is such a big decision. It's such a big decision. Because back then, when you have no money, $100 is a big investment, right? And so I really thought through it, whether I should buy this table or not. We ended up having to buy the table because we need people to sit down, right? And our first employees weren't real employees. We recruited interns out of local universities. Anybody who wants to join a project that we're doing, it's an internship, and we'll give you some food and a bit of money. So our first, let's say, 6, 7 hires were all interns from universities all over the country. So we were very scrappy. But I think that scrappiness actually got us through some of the tough moments in our company later on, and some of the more difficult decisions that we had to make.
I actually have a follow-up on this, right? It's great. I think you're being smart by hiring interns because they have lower barrier to try new things. But can you share a story about hiring your first 10 full-time employees?
Yeah.
I mean, right now, if you open a job posting, everyone in Indonesia will want to apply. But back then, nobody knows what the hell is Ajaib. How do you convince these first-time employees to come? And of course, hiring the first-time employees is also very important,
Yes.
right? How do you make sure you can attract great talent while you're just starting?
Yeah. By the way, now we're hiring globally, so we gotta restart educating everybody who we are, introducing ourselves. So, it's never ending. Actually, the people hiring journey, we think is incredibly important, especially in Southeast Asia, as a key success factor is having really great talents around you to be magnets of other great talents. So I think in the beginning, we just did not have the credibility or money to hire all these people with great resumes and experience, right? We know that we were educated that the first 10 is incredibly important for your culture. You better hire the right ones. But when we came back to Indonesia, we had to throw out the manual book out the door because survival. We just need somebody in there, right? So in the beginning, right, we gravitated towards a strategy of let's talk to our friends, people who we know from previous colleagues who would be willing to stake their career with us, take a big loss in their earning potential, and join us. So I went to BCG and I took some people. I went to my friends back in the US. I took some people. I went to there was this person that was working with my family. I was like, yeah, okay, how about I take you? So we just pulled everybody to come along, and one of the things that became a blessing is that those people ended up being witnesses of our scrappy culture in the beginning. So today, they're very strong culture bearers for us. So out of our first 10 employees, I think we still have about 5 of them here. And they represent culture bearers when we have doubts on new executive hiring or very senior hires. I put some of them in front to go and test for culture. Wow. So it is true that culture is actually built over time. So, I think that scrappiness and do what you need to do in the beginning, but, being very thoughtful about what you say, how you act during the first initial crisis moments in your company, life and death, is going to determine how your culture develops over time, many, many years later.
Got it. Is there any near-death experience, meaning for the company, that you can also share? Because I want to share this insights also to fellow founders out there that maybe they're not alone, and maybe someone who has went through that becomes very successful. So like you.
Yeah. I mean, the whole story of Ajaib is a story of near-death experiences, right? I mean, I think that people who've been with us for like more than 5 years, the new people coming in would always look at them when we're facing an SOS situation. They're like, how come you're not worried? It's like, no, because we've survived enough. And so we know that it's solvable issues and solvable problems. Carrying to the very early stages of the company when nobody knew about us, and I mean nobody, that also meant our own government and regulators. So, we were a licensed financial services company. And in our first year, we were operating, we got 300,000 registered customers in our first year. And so everything was, really exciting and everything. And all of a sudden, we got delisted out of Google Play and also out of the App Store. Completely delisting immediately. And it's like, what's going on? And then before we know it, there's news that came out that Ajaib, we are a legal peer-to-peer lending company. And therefore, we've been blocked and suspended.
They did that before investigation to you.
Okay. I know it's called Frankly Speaking, but it's someone else's fault in the process. Okay, and my first call was immediately to Jeff from Alpha. I was like,
yes.
Hey, Jeff, this thing just happened. We're all really shook. We don't know what to do. We're going to lose customers. We don't know what to do. We literally do not know anybody. Here I am just coming back from the US. I don't know anybody anywhere. And it looked like that's the end of it for us. We thought that people wouldn't trust us anymore and it would, be in the public domain that there was a news of this happening forever. But we just continued on. We pushed on. We actually went to the regulator's office. We said, hey, something happened. Obviously, someone did something, and we want to introduce ourselves. Here's who we are. Here's our license. We're for real. So we kind of went there almost every day for 2 weeks, and finally got an audience on the 6th floor. I was able to go inside the building, and the 6th floor, we explained ourselves, and it took another 1 week for them to really open it up. And when it opened up, we thought that we needed to do a lot to change things or maybe rebrand the company, but no. Our customers were there for us. Our customers continued on, and it was as if nothing really big happened. And so that really taught us a lot of things. That first, in a crisis moment, you recognize that it's a crisis. Second, don't panic. I think clarity of thought is really important. And third, being able to communicate clearly to your employees, to stakeholders, to investors are also really important. And this experience happened multiple times. There's many of these stories. Maybe twice every year, there's something that can kill you as a company. And so in company building, it's really precious, growing baby that you gotta learn and protect and be adaptable over time. And so that's why I believe that when you start a company, you need to choose a domain that you're actually genuinely interested in enough to be obsessive compulsive on. Otherwise, any of these near-death experiences could just be the end of it, because you can always tell yourselves it's out of our control, can't do it, and there's so many reasons that you can come up with that's valid as to why you shouldn't continue on.
That's amazing. And glad that we can be a little bit of help also in that situation.
Yeah.
So now Ajaib has 3 to 4 million
a bit more
users
than that, yes.
in the platform, and most of them are first-time investors. What do you think has been Ajaib's ingredient of success in attracting these first-time investors? Right? What was their most significant barrier to try investing, and how did you break this barrier?
Yeah. So we started out with equities, local equities as an asset class. And what we did was that we launched the very first fully digital brokerage experience, a discount brokerage experience. And we said, we don't care who you are, we'll accept you if you pass our KYC. We don't care how much money you have, just start first here as a beginner, and you can learn along the way. And we'll give you a really nice service for you wherever you are, right? And so remember that divide that I said about the rising middle class in Indonesia and the incumbents. And by the way, this is not just in Indonesia. This is basically everywhere else where there's a rising middle class with a youthful population. So you're also talking about Philippines. You're also talking, to a certain extent, Vietnam. To a lesser extent, maybe in Malaysia and Thailand as well. But this is a Southeast Asia thing that's happened, right? So we ended up capturing those customers. And in fact, till today, 80% of our customers are outside of tier 1 cities, right? And we asked ourselves, why? Why are young people outside of tier 1 cities gravitating towards us? Well, the reason is because the incumbents don't like to go outside of tier 1 cities. It's expensive to build branches. It's expensive for the salespeople. It's quite distributed geographically, so the coverage is a bit difficult. And so, this is the forgotten parts of the economy. And we see one of our mission is to help, improve the distribution of economic gains to everybody in the geography. And so that's what we did well around equities. But we continue to have to do it again and again around crypto, which we think is this generation's asset class. We have to bridge between people who are used to traditional finance to go to crypto, opening up people's eyes around international equities, introducing them that there's equities in the US and so forth, derivative products. So, we're growing together with our customers. And we're educating them to be better at managing their money and their wealth as they earn more in their careers.
Interesting. I think it makes a lot of sense. Right now, maybe the audience are not aware, but 10 years ago, it's very, very difficult to open up investment account, right? You need to go to a branch.
5 years ago, in fact. Not
before
too long ago.
Ajaib, before Ajaib, right? Now I understand, because even though people are interested, they need to go to maybe one of the big cities to open up this account, and even then, maybe they need a certain amount of deposit to do this. So
Yes.
simply by digitizing all these things,
Yes.
of course, it's not simple.
Yeah.
But you're able to provide access to this people. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And this story is not unique to this part of the world. This story has played out in LATAM, in Brazil largely. It's played out a lot in India. And many, many years ago, in fact, it played out in China. And the incredible thing is that these companies who started out thinking about wealth, helping people with their investments, end up offering multiple services, because as the customers grew, they actually want access to modernized financial services across the board, not just this one thing that they start investing in. And so, we think this is just the beginning of a revolution around how people think about their wealth and their money in Indonesia, and also in greater Southeast Asia, and areas especially with a lot of population of young people rising middle class. And we're really excited to be a part of it and hopefully accelerate it across the board.
Anderson, what % of Indonesian is now investing?
Sure. So right now, it's somewhere more or less 5% of people in Indonesia are investing in capital markets. So they own equities or such. When we first started, that number was less than 1%. So we're super happy to have seen that the progression of financial inclusion and financial literacy has really improved in this country. But this is just the beginning. It's really just the beginning. If we see the trajectory of what happened in India and what happened in Brazil, if we do the right things, this can accelerate really, really quickly, really soon, right? Again, we're not just talking about equities. We're talking about, as young people, as millennials, Gen Z, we don't let borders stop us from being able to invest globally. That's what they want. And so this is about access to crypto products, to mutual funds, to international equities, to derivative products, option products. So, it's a really exciting time for a rising middle class in these countries, because they'll be part of not just their country's economic growth, but also global economic growth, and also, trends in technology that's going to uplift everybody in the world.
I think so right now it's 5%. I think you mentioned it very humbly that just 4 or 5 years ago, it was less than 1%. So you didn't mention that probably Ajaib plays a very, very big role in that, right? So that's a very great social impact that you and the team have done. My question is, what does it take to bring from 5% to 10% or 15%?
Yeah.
Of course, innovators like you have helped, but what else is needed to triple this penetration?
Sure. So I think, first of all, I try to build a company that does good. And so if that good is replicated by others around, that's also incredible for us. So I think, our role is not to, build gates around this development. Our goal is we also want to push other peers to digitize and help drive this multiplication of people who look at capital markets and look at investing for the future as an important part of their socioeconomic mobility growth, right? So I think part of it is that, really setting an example of how, digitizing your brokerage services can get you more customers, embracing blockchain technologies, whether around crypto exchanges or building new use cases around blockchain, can help. So we really hope that we are part of a movement, and hopefully we're leading that movement to accelerate this growth. So one part of it is that technology has a huge, huge part to play here. And it's not just in Indonesia. We've seen it in Brazil and India. When technology adoption increases, the growth of retail investors will triple in speed very, very quickly, right? I think second is also making sure that, we as a society in Southeast Asia and our governments see that this is a very important part of pushing our social mobility, again, in Southeast Asia. We don't want a whole population of people that's a rising middle class that doesn't really save, and they just spend, and they get hit with some unfortunate events, and then they go back down the socioeconomic ladder in progression. That's what we don't want. We want Southeast Asia to grow and have our people be part of that growth. That when we say that we want to stimulate growth through our banks, that consumer companies should also grow, that all these things needs to grow, that our population can be a shareholder in it and get the dividends of the collective growth of the country, right?
Yeah.
So we're very passionate about seeing that encouraging people to invest and thinking about their wealth is a very important part to the national strategy of progressing together.
Great. Anderson, what do you think is the most important trait of being a CEO, especially CEO for a high growth, disruptive technology company like yours in financial service, which is highly regulated, right?
Yeah.
What do you think is the most important trait?
The most important thing is resilience. Okay. So all these Southeast Asian founders need to understand that unlike areas with concentrated tech talents who've brought IPOs multiple times, like the US or China, or now in a lot of ways India, you as a CEO don't get to leave anytime soon. You really, in fact, you as a founder, whatever C-level, you're probably going to be there many years after your IPO, because getting professionals to sit in, you don't have that luxury of former CEOs that's brought companies public IPO multiple times and coming back to do it again all over, right? Everybody's learning at the same time. How many tech companies have IPO'd in this part of the world, right? And so you got to be super resilient. You're going to be an expert in taking on the worst of the worst problems in your company, things that you don't like to do. And you got to get used to it and just be super resilient and wake up the next morning and do it all over again. It's not a so to contrary to people's belief, it's not a glamorous job once you get into the things. It's a very tough job. So again, you better really like what you do, because when the going gets tough, you got to be passionate enough to stay throughout. And be resilient to get through to the other end.
So some people say, oh, I'm tired with my corporate job. I just want to chill a little bit. Let me open up my new business and then have a passive income. That's totally wrong.
No, that's totally wrong. Look, going from 0 to 1 to anything, even if you believe that you want to build a lifestyle business, right? It's tough. 0 to 1 on anything, right? Scaling is another thing. So if you want to do a lifestyle business, 0 to 1 is really tough. And then, you can chill after that. You can decide not to scale your business. But 0 to 1 on anything is tough. So you better choose 0 to 1 to something that's meaningful to you in however way you decide that it is meaningful to you.
So, Anderson, you have great credentials, right? We've mentioned this. Cornell, Stanford, IBM, BCG, Forbes 30 under 30. Reflecting on your journey, and I'm actually borrowing from the famous Stanford MBA essay. What matters most to you, and why?
So that's the question from Stanford MBA when you apply to it, right? Took me quite a lot of introspection and a lot of thinking for me to write that out. What I wrote was about building a sense of belonging. And for me, using technology to do that, I achieved in 2 ways. First, I built a company in a culture that I really like, that embraces the values and principles that I believe we should uphold ourselves to, that I really like, which we can go a bit more into later. And the second way is really making the general mass population feel included in the development of their country, of their economy, regardless of what their backgrounds are and who they are or wherever they are. To me, this is my way of being able to help with inclusion, or at least making people feel included in what's happening out there.
That's great. You mentioned also about the importance of culture.
Yeah.
Can you share a little bit why do you think it's important, and what kind of culture are you building at Ajaib?
I think it's incredibly important. So again, for founders who thinking about founding companies in Southeast Asia, this, I would say, in my opinion, the single largest, probability of success after market size to me is whether you can attract great talents. Southeast Asia, if you want to be the best in anything, no one has ever built it before. And therefore, if you believe that you want to build the best, you got to hire from the best, and therefore you have to be able to hire globally. So that will be determinant to how big you're going to get or how successful you're going to get. And so building a culture is really important. So, more than overwhelming parts of our leadership team are international. Mm-hmm. Half of them are female and male, both. We embrace anybody from any background, socioeconomic background or otherwise, anywhere there are. We are school blind when we recruit. So I've instructed my HR team not to see schools when we're making decisions on recruitment. Everything is tested. So everybody has their own case studies for whatever role you take from the lowest to the highest. You pass that test, you get through to the next round. We have mandatory culture tests. Whoever you are, even if I'm hiring an executive, a C-level, someone who's worked for 30, 40 years, you got to get through our HR interview before you talk to anybody in the company. We're a very international culture of people who have high ownership to what we do. We don't believe in people who wants to be here for the short run. We don't believe in people who's here to want to get a promotion every single year, a salary increase every single year. We think that's not a good way that the system in Southeast Asia has educated tech talents over the past 5 to 10 years. So we actually try to be super thoughtful in our cultural development so that we can build a place where concentrated talent globally can be magnets for other great talents elsewhere in the world. So that's why we put huge emphasis on culture and finding the right people in the company.
So can you give some practical tips? How do you exactly build this culture? You mentioned a little bit about how you hire carefully. Maybe you hire people who would be a great fit.
Yeah.
Other than that, what are some practical tips to build this culture?
Yeah. So I think I always believe that the first most important part in building a great culture is that you have to import people with already good culture. It's incredibly difficult to change culture, incredibly difficult. So when you're recruiting, you better really find people who are aligned in values and principles as you. And when you interview them, what I do is that I have clear cultural questions that I would prepare, that when you answer them, I've heard the same answer for 200, 300 people, and I've seen people's answers and how they, over the past 6 years, succeed or fail, right? So it's a whole iteration process that we narrow down to a complete science of this. So it's actually, a lot of it is actually very thoughtful and not feeling based. It's super statistically driven. When a senior leadership doesn't work out for us, we as a team come together and we ask ourselves, what happened in the interview process? Did we see it in the red flags or not? So for every folk that hire that didn't work out, most oftentimes we know why they would not work out because of the red flags that we already flagged early on. So it's a whole iterative process. Practically, you got to track it. You got to track your notes for interviews all the time. What did they answer for what? And that's one of the ways of doing it. And do plenty of reference checks, plenty of it.
Great, thanks for sharing that. Yeah. Looking ahead, with everything you've accomplished, is there something you still aspire to do as a person or for Ajaib?
Well, it's just the beginning. It really is. There's so many different categories of products that we have yet to touch, and even deepening within the current categories, and also bringing this to other geographies. We're like in the beginning. We're probably where all these tech companies that I heard of in 2014 starting out. I feel we're just a rumor that's just starting out, and hopefully we get to multiply that a lot bigger than we are right now. So we still internally believe that we're just starting out. This is the beginning, and this is a long journey for us.
For young entrepreneurs out there who's watching this, any piece of advice you can give them on how they should start their journey as entrepreneurs?
Well, I think you need to ask yourself, what do you know that nobody else knows in the world? That's a measuring stick to whether you should start a company or not. And to find the answer, you need to be a obsessive compulsive or a domain expert in something. The answer might be there, but people don't care enough to look deeper, and so you need to be obsessive compulsive to actually find out these things.
Can you explain a little bit what do you mean by obsessive compulsive?
Sure. So when you sleep and you wake up, that's what you think about.
Okay.
Right? People like to ask me what keeps me up at night, and my answer is what gets me up in the morning is this excitement to really go into the unknown and discover what we can build for the first time in this part of the world, right? So, for us, it was discovering through this journey of pivoting, understanding that actually the Indonesians do want to invest, but they find it very difficult, and so they gravitated towards this not so good product called unit-linked insurance that's actually, for many reasons, well-researched, that is actually less good for you. And they would be taking that loss so that there's a convenience of investing. And that's how we knew something that people didn't know, that people actually want to invest if you actually help them do it and make it easier. So some of these insights needs to be known throughout the journey. Some of it might be wrong, some of it might be right, but you've got to ask yourself, what do you know that nobody else in this whole world knows?
A lot of people now, either Indonesia or globally, have some skepticism about the Indonesian technology landscape.
Yes.
Right, or Indonesian startup landscape in general. What can you share with them about thinking about the Indonesian economy and its potential?
Yeah, sure. So I think, first of all, there's much that we need to do as an ecosystem to improve trust in our companies, to improve quality of talents in our companies, to improve governance in our companies. So we need to take responsibility for some of that part, and this is part of healthying up the ecosystem, right? I think another part is Indonesia and Southeast Asia presents a massive opportunity still today. If you think about pockets of growth from mass market or mass consumers anywhere in the world that's available right now, that's still at the early stages of potential. You're talking about Southeast Asia and LATAM to a certain extent. And so, we've seen great companies coming out of LATAM, coming out of Brazil, coming out of Mexico City. One of the great things about Southeast Asia is that maybe the cultural divide between, going from Brazil to Mexico City is actually much bigger than going from Indonesia to, let's say, Malaysia or even the Philippines. So there's a lot of things that potential for companies to go geographic expansion to all of Southeast Asia. Not a lot of companies, including ours, have gotten to that stage yet, but we have to push ourselves to dream bigger and not just constrain ourselves to just Indonesia as a country, right? So the economic opportunities is still massive.
Yeah.
You're also going to build a good company that does well because you're helping this part of the world improve as their GDP per capita improves as well. So this is where you get access to a massive rising middle class who is open to technology adoption, who's tech savvy, and who's super young in age. And our GDP per capita is not going down. It's just going to go one direction. It's just going to go up. The question is, how fast is it going to go up? So this is probably a play that's a bit longer than most people thought starting out the journey, but this is massive opportunities in the long haul. We just need to take some responsibility and improve parts of the ecosystem as well.
Great. Last question. For our listeners who are young Indonesians who have not invested before, and maybe they're hesitant, because you mentioned 95% of the population has not invested.
Yeah.
What advice can you give them? How should they pass that barrier to start investing?
Sure. So I think first of all is that you need to realize that this is an important part of your future planning. Okay, it's not an expensive part of it. You can participate with 50,000 rupiah. Some mutual funds are even 10,000 rupiah. So you can actually start a journey. So you have to want
Even
to.
with 10,000.
Yes, but you have to want to, right? So I think for those crowd, I say, look, we at Ajaib, we've helped over 4 million people invest largely for the first time. We've seen all questions, everybody's questions. We've seen it already. We've answered many of those already. So, you guys are probably thinking about the same challenges that people have, which is how difficult is it to start? How do I start? These are main questions. So just realize that if you don't start investing, then you're not going to be part of the 8% economic development in Indonesia or the economic development elsewhere. You want to be part of it. That's why you want to be investing. And for those who have already been convinced that they want to invest but doesn't know how to start the journey, I say you should just try first. Mm-hmm. You don't need to trust what I say. You don't trust anybody say. Try before trusting. Okay, put in 10,000, 50,000, 100,000 of your money into any of the asset class you're interested in. If you're interested in mutual funds, which doesn't move that much, sure, do it. If you're interested in stocks, do it. If you're interested in crypto, do it. If you're interested in global brands, like you want to invest in Netflix and stuff, do it. And then observe yourself over the next few days. Do you feel like your heart is pounding because you're scared about that money movement going up and down? If you have no clue what's happening and you don't know why certain news moves and why it's going down, then you're risk averse. But if you feel super excited about it, now you have an incentive to track news, global news, what's going on in the economy, what's going on in the world of crypto, mm-hmm. Why is this going up, then you find yourself with a higher risk profile. And so from that, just understanding how you react to it, you can go up and down the risk lever. The least riskiest mutual funds, so put it there and forget about it if you are low risk. The next stage is bonds, and then it's equities or stocks, and then there's crypto, and then there's what's called derivatives. It's you got to be more experienced doing that. So there's no right or wrong. Everybody is in the spectrum of things, but you have to be participating in this. Otherwise, you're not participating in the economic growth of the country and technologies like blockchain and AI and things like that. This is the one easiest thing you can do sitting at home where you can participate in the global growth of something.
Amazing advice.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Anderson,
Thank
for
you so
your
much.
time. We're so happy to have you today here.
Happy to be here too.
Thank you, bro.
Thank you.